those of you who aren't here during Essential Class, it's been like 2 weeks, like talking about what happened with the event at the Witch at Endor. It was a real thing. It did take place. It was what we would consider necromancy, and important for us to remember that the Bible specifically never tells us that it can't happen. It just tells us not to do it, right? Not to fool with witchcraft and occult things and evil stuff. Okay, that was more though. Once we kind of got through that and unpacked all that, that event that took place in chapter 28 was more of a description on Saul's judgment and disobedience, how he had not been doing what he should have been doing, and God didn't listen to, wouldn't answer him, right? And that thing that happened, he went, instead of going to God for answers, went essentially the opposite direction for answers. That was more of an indication of how far he had fallen, right? That brought us into chapter 30, which we did this morning as well, which David had spent time with the Philistines because he got tired of running from Saul. Been 7 years worth of running from Saul. So he started to do things on his own, started warring against the areas around him, taking the spoils. And then when Achish, the king of the Philistines, asked him to fight the Israelites, at first David was going to. The princes, the other generals there in Achish's army stepped in and told them that David was not trustworthy because he was an Israelite. So David goes back to Ziklag, which is the area that he was living in. That's where his family was. That's where the men that were with him's family was. When they got back to Ziklag, the Amalekites had been there and taken everything. They had taken his wives, they'd taken their kids, they'd taken all the spoils, they'd taken all of those things. And that was a moment there that David realized that he should not have been doing things on his own. He should have been trusting God. Unlike Saul, David realizes that, goes to the Lord in humility, and God tells him to go and defeat the Amalekites. And he does in chapter 30, and that's where we finished at this morning, was that he finished up with defeating the Amalekites. He gets everything back, all the spoils that he had taken from the other Israelite communities. He gives those back as well. He has been restored essentially as the 600 or 700 people that were around him as their leader, turning to God, right? With his faith was small. That's the fourth point we have of David's strategy here that we've gone through in these lessons. Him returning to God when his faith was small allowed him to get the wisdom, and God blessed him because of that. Right? That takes us to the end of chapter 30. This lesson doesn't finish up, though, until we finish with chapter 31, which will close out the book of 1 Samuel. Go ahead, Chad, and click that. In chapter 31, we see the death of Saul and Jonathan. So back when Jonathan and David and Saul kind of saw each other in chapter 26, I think, for the last time, we now see David kind of reestablished. God has reestablished David. Not that he ever took the crown away from him, but the communion between God and David has been reconnected. Samuel, at the Witch of Endor event, told Saul that he was going to die, that it was going to happen. Now we see it take place in chapter 31. So that's what chapter 31 is all about. So David is reuniting here with his families. The armies of Israel were suffering a humiliating defeat at Gilboa, which is in northern Palestine, and 3 of Saul's sons were slain, just like Samuel had told him was going to happen in verse 19 of chapter 28. So let's start with reading the first 4 verses here of Samuel chapter 31. Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines, and fell down slain in the mount Gilboa. And the Philistines followed hard upon Saul and upon his sons, and the Philistines slew Jonathan and Abinadab and Melchishua, which were Saul's sons. And the battle went sore against Saul, and the archers hit him, and he was sore wounded of the archers. Then said Saul to his armor-bearer, "Draw thy sword, and thrust me through therewith, lest these uncircumcised one come and thrust me through and abuse me. But his armor-bearer would not, for he was sore afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell upon it. Right? So in this battle, Jonathan gets killed. In the midst of this, we can assume in hand-to-hand combat, fighting in some form or fashion with the Philistines. Of course, Saul would not be in the thick of the battle, right? He would not be in the front of this. He would be back kind of watching over it. And we see several of the archers actually, kind of come and manage to pierce Saul through. And his injuries were such that he realized that he wasn't going to die instantly, but he was going to eventually die. The battle was being lost poorly enough that he could probably see the Philistines pushing into his camp and into the area, and he did not want the Philistines to be able to take him and kill him and first probably abuse him, right? Would make sense, they would do that, right? They get a hold of the king, they're going to torture the king, going to let the people know that they're torturing the king, right? And eventually he's going to be killed. Saul did not want that to happen, so he requests of his armor-bearer to take a sword to him. And much like most of Saul's life that we have seen throughout these several chapters now, these close to 30 chapters that we've looked at with Saul, Saul was a wimp, and has been pretty much his entirety of his life. Even when he was first picked to be king, right, he wanted nothing to do with that, and he left town and tried to go find the donkeys that he was looking for. He tried to think of every possible other way to do this. When Samuel gave him specific instructions to show that he was going to be king, and he did those things, he still did not want to be king. He's made poor decision after poor decision. He's never really been a man of his word, and we see him even here kind of towards the end of his life just being a big old baby. Did not really even have the honor at this point to fall on his own sword. He does eventually, right? But it's because it's the very last possible thing. In honor in combat, and especially in this era, if the king was going to be captured, he would fall on his own sword. That was an honorable way to die. That was a very kind of a well-known thing. He knew that as well. The men who were around him would have watched and witnessed him trying to convince his armor-bearer, who was just a kid, just a guy, not really a soldier, just somebody who was carrying his stuff, had no really training in combat at all. He was just a pack mule, essentially. Probably a young boy, probably in his early teenage age, that was able to carry their stuff around. He's requesting of a young man to do this. Kind of really shows you just the state of how poor character of man Saul was. And we've seen him make these terrible decisions through and through, all the way out. Eventually, though, that he kind of realizes here that nobody's going to take care of this for him. He's going to have to take care of himself, and he falls on his own sword there in chapter 4, in verse number 4. So we find now that because of Saul's poor choices that he has made, he didn't defeat entirely the Amalekites back when he was supposed to, back in chapter 8, or chapter 12, sorry. There's been multiple times that he's kind of allowed the Philistines to hang around when he should not. He's never really went to the Lord to get any type of instruction or directions at all. He's only done that when he has been kind of backed against the wall. We've seen him try to kill David now because of his jealousy. The Lord has allowed the spirit to come on him that makes him jealous and angry and grumpy all the time. And all of this has been because of Saul's own decisions to do things his own way and not to follow the Lord's way. And it ends with Jonathan, who would have been an excellent right-hand man for David going forward. If you can imagine what the kingdom would have looked like with Jonathan and David both. We know that eventually in David's life he gets tired of constantly fighting. If he would have had Jonathan on his side to take care of some of that stuff, you can imagine what David would have been able to do at home with the day-to-day operation of the kingdom. It really probably would have expelled the borders of the Israel even more than what it was while David was there. But because of Saul's poor choices, we see a good man in Jonathan being killed as well during this battle that really shouldn't have even happened to start off with. So, just as was predicted by the witch there, by Samuel at the witch at Endor, Saul falls on his own sword. His sons are killed as well. Verse 5, and when his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he likewise fell upon his sword and died with him. And when the men of Israel were on the other side of the valley, and they that were there on the other side of the Jordan, saw that the men of Israel fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they forsook the cities and fled, and the Philistines came and dwelt in them. And it came to pass on the morrow, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, that they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen in the Mount Gilboa. And they cut off his head, and stripped off his armor, and sent into the land of the Philistines round about, to publish it in the house of their idols and among the people. And they put his armor in the house of Ashtaroth, and they fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. And when the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead heard of that which was the Philistines had done to Saul, and the valiant men arose and went all night, and took the body of Saul and the body of his sons from the walls of Bethshan, and came to Jabesh, and burnt them there. And they took their bones and buried them under a tree at Jabesh, and fasted for 7 days. So Saul was worried about the Philistines doing something to him, and what actually happened was the Philistines did the very thing Saul was worried about. They managed to get his body, they mutilated it, announced to the Israelites that their king was dead. They hung the body of Saul, cut his head off, paraded it around, hung the bodies of Saul and his sons in a wall in Bethshan, which would have been a real central area in the land in central Palestine at the time, where the Philistines were there. The areas around Gibeah that they had fought in, the Israelites fled from those cities and those towns. The Philistines take those over. And if you notice there in, where was it at? Thought I marked it, but I didn't. Verse 7, the men of Israel saw that were on the other side of the Jordan. They saw that the men of Israel fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, and they forsook their cities and fled, and the Philistines came and dwelt in them. Now, Jordan River runs, this day and age, Jordan River runs right through what? What do we know in like modern times? Where does the Jordan River flow through? Come on, guys, you listen to the news. Where does it run through? Jordan, but where else? Nope, not Jerusalem. The Gaza Strip. Okay, so the Jordan River is close to the Gaza Strip. Why is the Gaza Strip so important right now? What's going on in Gaza? Why is there fighting in Gaza? Why are the Israelites? Why is Israel, not Israelites? Why are the Jews attacking the Palestinians? What's the reason behind it? What? Land, right? What do they lay claim to? Come on. You guys, I know you all watch the news. Why is Israel always fighting with Palestine? Because of the Gaza Strip, right? Why does Israel want the Gaza Strip? They think it's theirs, right? Is Gaza in old-timey promised land? You can shake your head, yes, you can. Yes, it is, right? Biblically, eventually, in Revelation, eventually Israel is going to get peace in the Middle East because when Christ comes back, okay? That is eventually going to happen. They are trying to do that now and force the hand. I'm not going to get into the political range of what they're doing being right or wrong. That's for you all to decide. But what I'm getting to is the reason that the Palestinians think that they have right to that same area. Palestine are direct descendants of who? What? The Philistines. Philistine and Palestine sounds a whole lot alike, right? The Palestinians are a direct line from the Philistines. We see now in 1 Samuel that when this battle takes place, okay, when Saul and Jonathan and all these guys die, right before David takes the throne, the Philistines have done what to the Jordan River? What does it tell us in verses 6, 7, and 8? The Israelites have done what to those cities? They left them, correct? The Philistines, the Palestinians, have moved into that area and have claimed that as their own. Okay? So now you understand why that the Palestinians that are in the Gaza Strip right now, why they think they own that land as well. It makes total sense to people who aren't of Jewish descent, right? people who study the scriptures, we understand why there is such a fight right there amongst the area in the Gaza Strip. It all stems back from because the Israelites did not fully take the land over like God told them to. Okay? And the reason that specifically the Palestinians are so concerned with the Gaza Strip, Jordan River, that area, is because of the Palestine, the Philistines, when they were at one of the great nations of the world, they inhabited that land. Now, we know David's going to come in and push them out, right? They're going to come back in for a while. From this point forward, there's a constant back and forth of this area. Okay? It all starts, though, when Joshua technically didn't fully take it over. And then God tried to do it again when they got a king, and they didn't fully take it over. They didn't do what they're supposed to, and that's why the problem is always going on there, right? This is direct biblical language, right, to why there's a fight in Israel and Palestine, and the Palestinians, why they are fighting. Anytime you hear Palestinians on the news, think Philistines. They're the same people. Okay, it's just direct descendant. Okay, that's why there's all this going on there. Okay, interesting to think about, right? This would have been 2, 3, probably close to 4,000 years ago that this was going on, maybe 3,500, right? That's how long they have been fighting in the Middle East. All right, now, all the things that we try to do in the nation over there in the Middle East, all Trump or Clinton and the Bushes, all the stuff we try to do over there, back to Reagan, essentially, even Nixon, it's never going to fix it. Okay, it's never going to fix it. Right? They're always going to fight there. There's never going to be peace in the Middle East. That's never going to happen until the millennial reign comes and gets set up through Christ. That's the only way it's going to get fixed. All right, when Israel eventually comes back into the favor of the Lord and all these things kind of take place. Interesting to be able to see that even now, after all these years later, that's still going on over there. And it's going to continue to go on. Right? We can sign as many ceasefires as we want to. It doesn't matter. They're going to keep fighting because that's what they do. Okay, it's at the core. And that also, that same area caused Saul, Jonathan, and his brothers to get killed as well, fighting in the same place. Okay? We see, though, that even after they took Saul's armor and they put it in their pagan temples there, to the temple to Ashtaroth, which would have been one of the gods that they were serving, they fastened his headless body, it would have been his headless body, to the wall in Bethshan, which would have been a central hub for a lot of their pagan religions as well. And they were essentially parading around the fact that the King Saul was dead. That's what they were doing, continuing to humiliate the Israelites. As we finish up the chapter here, though, we see that some valiant men, there were apparently still some valiant men left in Israel at this point that weren't David's men. They went to Jabesh Gilead and recovered the bodies and burned them and buried the bones like they were supposed to. The man here that had dominated, and has dominated the majority of the book of 1 Samuel, dominated by self-will, dominated by pride, was doing everything he could, right? What was the reason, let's look back at this for a second too, what was the reason why Saul was so determined to kill David? Jealousy, but why? Because, exactly right, Warren. He wanted Jonathan. There's multiple times in Samuel where he's looked at Jonathan like, why are you friends with this guy? He is taking your throne. I want to make sure that you're the firstborn, you're the heir to the throne, you should be the next king in Israel. He was so consumed with trying to make sure that his line stayed in power in Israel, and his pride. He wanted to make sure his name carried on through Jonathan, and so on and so forth. Every decision that he made essentially was motivated by the fact that he was prideful. Was a terrible character man, right? Never really wanted the kingship, but once he got it, he didn't want to lose it either, right? He didn't want to give it up because he understood and kind of got used to the power that it brought. So he was trying to maintain a glorious recognition and reputation to his name for all of Israel's history. As we see, though, what actually happened to him was pretty inglorious, right? It was a pretty terrible way to go out. And then things happening to your body post all of this as well. Pretty humiliating and humbling as we kind of read this, all right? Go ahead, Chad. So, here we go, perfect. Israelite Philistine camp, as you can see here, Ziklag, this is where the people were staying. It was in, as you can see, Philistine, in the land of Philistia, very close to Gath, and we always point back to Gath. Why is Gath so important to the Philistines? Why? Go ahead, Mom. What'd you say? Exactly, right? That's where the giants were from. Goliath and his brothers were all from Gath. That's where they were hubbed from. That's where the gene pool of the giants for the Philistines that traces back through quite a ways. All that comes from Gath. That's why it was one of the central areas. If you're walking through Gath in this time, you would have seen giants. You would have absolutely seen them until David and his boys showed up and killed all of them for the most part. There were probably still some lingering post him, but not in Philistine, just in other areas. But David had kind of aligned himself there at Ziklag, that's where they were staying, and you can see how close the land of Amalek is, which now is considered southern Palestine. This is where Turkey and Iran and stuff is at. That's all beside the point. But that's where they were mooring at there in the Philistine camp, and you can see that little area coming through. There would be portions of the Jordan River, and that's again very prevalent to us, right? We not to us physically, but what we hear on our news all the time. Very important kind of area. Continues to be important as we move through the rest of this as well. Okay, go ahead, Chad, one more time. So imagine you as we finish this out, and it should bring it to the last slide. Maybe one more. Perfect. Does the sixth one pop up? Excellent. So imagine you were in, as I finish this here, imagine you were in David's shoes. How do you think you would react to the troubles that he faced? On the run from Saul, trying to kill him, aligning himself essentially with the enemy, going out and fighting against some of his own people in the outer areas and taking stuff from them as well. What would have been some of your reactions to the way that David, saying the troubles that he faced, and what we should say, and what David should say, and for 99% of the time David was this way, but there was moments that he wasn't. He did not always trust God regardless of the circumstances. Important lesson for us to take away from this and from the life of David specifically is that we also need to trust God no matter the circumstances. Things are bad, things are tough, seems like always bad luck is hitting us, whatever the case may be. Nothing seems to be working out the right way. Despair sets in. Important for us to remember to always trust in God no matter the circumstances. Now, and then the second question here I want to ask is, how can reviewing what you know about God help you to trust Him when times are tough? How can reviewing what you know about God help you trust Him when times are tough? Right, something that I mentioned today, right? We cannot worry for the future because we serve the God of history. You can look back, right, and you all have moments and instances where you can remember that God did this and this happened, right, or He worked things out in this way, and you think, man, I was pretty desperate at that time, and God took care of it. I got a desperate time coming forward in the future. I don't need to worry about that because I know God is going to take care of it, right? Reviewing the things God has done for you allows us to continue to further our trust in Him for uncertain times. David did that, right? At Ziklag, when all his people were gone, his wives were gone, his kids were gone, all of his men's kids were gone, the men were mad at him. They followed him for 7 years. Through caves and tunnels in the wilderness, and they followed him everywhere for 7 years, right? David was their guy. They get back to Ziklag. The people and everything's gone. It's been destroyed, essentially. They blame David, and what do they want to do to him? Do you all remember it? We're listening? They want to stone him, right? They were ready to stone David. His men were ready to stone him because of the poor decisions, right? David's pretty uncertain times there. We see him at the end of chapter 29, looking back to what God had done, renewing his trust in Him, asking God for help. God tells him to go and defeat the Amalekites. So reviewing what we know about God can help us trust Him in tough times. Now, what then can you do to renew your hope in God when trials linger on? Psalms 34:08. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusteth in Him. Wavering in our faith in face of trials, returning to God for renewed strength. God's plan has not gone away, and that there is no one who has hacked God and meddled with His loving and sovereign plan for us. That's why David writes in Psalm 34, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusteth Him." So next week, we will start the first book here, or the second book of Samuel, and we've pretty much gone from the first 8 chapters of 1 Samuel being about Samuel in charge. Kind of, he was the high priest. He was the guy in charge. He wasn't officially in charge. He was in charge. And then it shifts to Saul. Saul's now from about 12 or so to the end of the book. And now we get into 2 Samuel, and we start to see the reign of David. And starts with his reign in Hebron. And in chapter 2 of 2 Samuel, we see him officially anointed as king over Judah. And then, right after that, there's a civil war that we have to talk about that we'll get into as we get into more of this next week. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this lesson, for this time, for the story here of David, and being able to look at the contrasting results of lives lived, honoring to you and not honoring to you with Saul and David, and how we can see the consequences and the blessings of each of those things. How it's important for us to work well as a constant reminder to us to be faithfully serving you, regardless of trials, tribulations, or troubles, and knowing that you have promised us comfort, Lord, and you have promised us blessing and peace, Lord, through difficult times. It's important for us to remember, even when things are uncertain in our lives, nothing takes you by surprise, and we should in turn turn all over to you. Lord, thank you for this day that you've given us, for the good day at your services we've had as well. Pray we have a good week this week as well. Pray for back our time appointed here on Wednesday, and then again next Sunday morning too, Lord, and give us a good week this week in your name I pray. Amen.